What can we really say about the 2025 NFL Draft after a full season of college football? What's going on, everybody? Good morning. It is Wednesday, and normally on Wednesday we would be congregating to talk a little bit about some of the standout college football prospects from the most recent week of college football. Well, can't really do that now because there weren't enough games. We had conference championship games, and that's almost it. And there were some great performances. There was some stuff that you definitely take away from those games that you watched. Don't get me wrong. You know, if you were watching those games and you were thinking, hey, I want to see what Tez Johnson can do, you probably came away thinking, man, that Tez Johnson guy's the real deal. If you were watching those games and you were like, okay, let's see what Carson Beck's got, you probably weren't too happy with what you saw. So there's definitely stuff to learn from those games, but I can't spend an extended period of time talking about, what, 6 or 7 games? Some of which barely had any prospects worth discussing. So instead, I kind of want to do a summary show where after watching college football for the past year, after watching the last 3 months of football, we start to draw conclusions. We start to make inferences on what this draft class looks like. And I'm going to be speaking generally in this video. We're going to go position by position. We're going to start with the offense. And I'm just going to give my general sense of where this draft is at the various positions. And we try to find the intersection of Seahawks needs and 2025 NFL draft strengths. So let's start on the offensive side. We'll do the defense later today, probably in a couple of hours, honestly, like we usually do. And that'll kind of put a cap on this college football season, you know, the evaluation part. Now, we are going to learn a little bit more in the playoff and the bowl games. We are going to learn more at the combine, the pro days. It's not over, but we've got enough information to get most of the way there. And I think that it would be you definitely don't want to let the combine or your pro days override what you saw in the actual games throughout the season. So let's start with the quarterbacks here. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This quarterback class doesn't really do anything for me. To me, the number one quarterback is Cam Ward, and I do like Cam Ward. I do. But number one, I don't view him as some top-of-the-line QB prospect. I view him as a guy that in a typical quarterback class, like a decent quarterback class, would be like a mid-first round pick. But in this class, he's probably going to go in the top 3. Hard to believe he's getting past the Giants. Hard to believe he's getting past the Raiders if the Giants decide to go Shedeur Sanders. So one way or the other, he's going to go very early. And then that gets you to Shedeur Sanders, who, the talent's there. Wouldn't shock me if the off-the-field concerns tank his stock a little bit. If they don't, he's another guy who's almost certainly gone in the top 3. And if Shedeur Sanders is, in terms of the player, supposed to go in the top 3, but his attitude problems and his personality and the circus that comes with the Deion Sanders show around him drives him down to like the 20s, because that's approximately where the Seahawks are going to pick. Do you want to do that? Maybe. I don't know. I like Shedeur Sanders on the field, but I don't know if I want to say, okay, I'm going to ignore the fact that he's clearly not a very good teammate. I'm going to ignore the fact that he's going to bring the circus of Deion Sanders with him when he goes to the NFL, and I'm going to spend my first round pick on him when I don't need to. Like, if all these teams in front of me said, no, we're not messing with that, I kind of feel like the Seahawks would be a team that would be like, no, we're not going to mess with that. And then after that, there's not a lot that I like. I think that Drew Alar's an interesting second round kind of guy. Garrett Nussmeier's like a third round guy that I kind of like. Quinn Ewers, I'm really feels like every time I watch him now, I get less and less impressed. I was pretty high on him last year, but as the season went on, I started to notice some of the holes. And now I'm kind of at the point where it's like, this guy has Blaine Gabbert written all over him. So I don't hate him. I know that John Schneider probably still has a little bit of an affinity for him. But, I mean, if you could get him in like the second round, maybe. But if you're talking about like a first round pick, I don't think I'm on board with that anymore. And everybody else to me is just kind of a flyer at best. There are guys here that I really don't like Carson Beck. I'm completely over. Moreau, I'm over. So it's just not a good QB class, especially if you don't have a top 5 pick. So I don't like this QB class at all. If you look back at the videos we did talking about quarterbacks this year, most weeks I would just talk about the same 8 to 9 guys pretty much every single game. Every single week. And most of them I didn't even like. I just talked about them because they played objectively well. But that doesn't mean I want them. That doesn't mean I think they should be a first round pick or anything like that. I just think they played well. Like Jalen Milroe is like a poor man's Anthony Richardson to me. He's a good athlete, but I don't see much reason to believe that he's a good quarterback. There are a couple of guys here that intrigue me as like day 2 options. I like Alar and I like Nussmeier, but I'm not betting the future of my franchise on those guys. So I don't like this quarterback class. Running back was not an area of this draft I spent much time on, admittedly. Jean T's obviously phenomenal. Like, you can't say enough about Jean T. He is up there for best running back in recent memory in the draft with guys like Saquon, Bijan. I don't think he's Adrian Peterson, but not far off. After that, it gets a little more anonymous. I still think it's better than last year. Last year, my favorite running back in the draft was probably the Florida State guy. Other than that, I was just kind of like, there are some guys who I think are kind of interesting, some guys I'm not really into. But this year, there are probably going to be a few guys that go in the second round. Jean T's obviously a first round pick. And honestly, Jean T, I think you could make a pretty compelling argument should be a top 5 pick, but we'll get to that in the offseason. But it's a pretty good running back group. It's not as good as the Bijan, Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs draft, but it's good. It's definitely better than last year. Jean T alone makes that the case. And then you have everything else. You got the 2 Ohio State guys. I really like Ollie Gordon from Oklahoma State. You've got some real depth at this position as well, which is why I would say this is not a position the Seahawks need to spend a high pick on. If they're going to spend any pick at all, they can probably go pretty darn late. Like, you could get Jonah Coleman in about the 7th round. I had fun rooting for Jonah Coleman as a Husky this year. Who wouldn't want to maybe root for him as a Seahawk next year? So, there's a lot of good stuff in this draft at the running back position. So, this is a good class for that. I don't think the Seahawks really have a big need there, but if they decided they want to increase their depth, there are definitely opportunities to do so. And I kind of feel the same, except on steroids at the wide receiver position. Really good receiver class. Not as good as we thought before the season started, but you've got a couple of blue chippers, and then you've got a couple of other really, really good prospects as well. And the depth is kind of crazy here. Look at all these guys that the consensus big board think will go in the 2nd and 3rd round. You've got, what do they have here? They've got 9 guys that they're estimating to go in the 2nd or 3rd round. You've got the 2 Oregon guys. You've got the Miami guys, Restrepo, Kyron Lacy. You've got Dion Burks, who I think didn't even do that much this year. You go beyond that, and you're still finding guys who are really interesting, like Jaden Higgins, the Iowa State guy who's got like the greatest hands that I've ever seen in my life. Dude's a killer. And I think that the Seahawks clearly are going to have a need at receiver. They need a receiver to replace Lockett. and they're going to have opportunity after opportunity to find that guy. They're going to have their second round pick come up, and they're going to have good options. Their third round pick is going to come up. They're going to have good options. They might even be able to get away with getting a really good receiver who could immediately become a viable number 3 in the 4th or 5th round. So this is one position where I think the Seahawks needs and the Seahawks big board are going to have good synchronization. We don't need another star here. We have DK, we have JSN. We just need another guy who can be the number 3 in an offense that is pretty loaded at running back and tight end as well. We just need somebody who can maybe chip in like 600 yards over the course of a season. That's not going to be that hard to find. Tight end, it actually got a little bit better, I feel like, as the season went on. Tyler Warren's emergence was big. He became, I think, a clear first-round pick at this point. And you have another clear first-round guy in Loveland. Both those guys are really good. Remember, Loveland doesn't have a quarterback, and he still produces over in Michigan. Now, after those top 2 guys, there is a slip. And don't get me wrong, these guys are not Brock Bowers. We don't have anything close to a Brock Bowers this time. But the depth is okay. There are some guys here who I think will be good pros. I like Terrence Ferguson. I like Gadsden. Delp is interesting as a talent. The production has not been there. There's going to be some good guys here in the day 3 range. The day 2 range is the weak part here. And that is kind of a shame because day 2 might be where the Seahawks are thinking about getting a tight end. But even then, there are going to be some guys. Like Gunnar Helm will probably be a pretty decent pro. I like Mason Taylor in the pros as well. You could get both those guys in about the 3rd round. So it's not as good as last year just because of Bowers. But I do think it's good. I do think this is a good tight end class. I don't feel badly about it. So I wouldn't call it strong, but I'd say a little better than average. Tackle's pretty good this year. I don't feel like we have a super duper blue chipper this year at tackle. At least not left tackle. We don't have, I don't know, DeBrickashaw Ferguson. We don't have Eric Fisher. We don't have that super duper Orlando Pace, Walter Jones. But we've got a collection of good left tackles. And I think the thing that stands out the most would be it's a really strong draft for right tackles, which goes well because the Seahawks don't really need a left tackle right now. They might need a right tackle. And even if they don't need a right tackle, they might need a right tackle to move inside to guard, because presumably they're going to want to try to find a guard that is mobile. And often the way you do that is you get a right tackle and convert him. So when you look at guys like Cameron Williams, Wyatt Millham, who's playing left tackle in college, I don't think he'll be able to do it in the NFL. Marcus Imbo, Emory Jones Jr., Johnny Cornelius, Blake Miller, Anthony Belton playing left tackle at NC State, but he's so big I think he'll move. A lot of good right tackles in the top 100, and I think the Seahawks are going to be able to find either a right tackle to provide insurance against Lucas getting hurt again, or a right tackle to move inside to guard. So I like that part of the draft. Now, when you get to the interior of the offensive line, I'm not really liking what I see here, admittedly. Left guard's okay, but we didn't have anybody really rise up and just seize control of the interior offensive line spot this year. You can see that they don't have any of these guys ranked in the top 32. So they don't think any of them are worth a first-round pick. Booker was actually graded out pretty poorly throughout the year by PFF. Donovan Jackson missed a lot of the season, so it was harder to evaluate him. And then you have a kind of a steep drop-off after those 3 guys to like the 3rd round. You've got a William and Mary guy who knows what he's going to be in the pros. You don't find a center until you get to about the 4th round range. It's a really bad center draft. And there are some good right guards, but, I mean, right guards are pretty easy. Most drafts are pretty thick at right guard. So we're doing okay at left guard, I guess. But we don't have a superstar left guard prospect, I don't think. And center is a wasteland. All right. That's all I got. That's how I'm looking at this draft class so far. Let me know what you guys think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks.